Thank you.
Deep breath. You're doing all right.
Alrighty. Welcome back. I am Carol, the Crafty Grandma. Let me fix my TV because it seems to be a little wonky right now. Let's get that taken care of. Get myself all set up and ready to go. There we go. That's better. Sorry about that. TV decided to reset itself. So I am Carol, the Crafty Grandma, and today I am going to work on a Patriotic disappearing 9 patch. And all I'm using is a charm pack that I got from Annie's Crafts. I'm in a club, they send me 2 charm packs a month. I picked up a jelly roll a couple weeks ago to do another project, which I believe it's only on Facebook available. But I ended up with more than enough strips. I think I could get like 2 or 3 different quilts out of that still. And then I have my thread, my backing, and my batting. So I have everything here that I need, and I'm going to see what I can do about putting together a disappearing 9 patch. If you want to quilt along with me, grab yourself a charm pack, grab yourself a jelly roll, get your machine out, set it all up, and we can go to town. I do apologize because I have a cat right here that is wanting attention, so give me just one moment. Let me let her know that she's loved. Yes, it's a good girl. Okay, that took care of the cat. Hopefully that means she's not going to be jumping up on the table to join us, because she does like to sleep right here on my ironing board. All right, so what I did was I determined that I was going to need 36 squares from my charm pack, because there are 9 squares in each block, and from those 9 squares, 9 times 4, I'm going to end up with 4 squares. In the pack that I happen to have, and all packs are different, they come in different colors and shapes and sizes. I've got one here that's a spring pack. It does have darks to lights on it, but different type of fabric, different fabric. They come in all sorts of different things, so depending on what you want. The idea of the disappearing 9 patch, you need to have a dark color or a primary color set up in the center. So we're going to be looking at these on the design wall back here and see which way I like them best. This one has words on it, and they go both directions, so up and down. And with that one being red, I also have white with red print on it. So do I have one that says Old Glory? Let's see. See how it looks if we put all of the same sort of ones together. Those are stars. Yes, I do. Look at that. All right. So Old Glory. So now we have 2 that have the words on them. And that's there. There are a couple of those. And there's some with stripes. Let's see. Other reds that I have. In your disappearing 9 patch, this block here is never going to get cut. So any big prints that you have, if you've got something that's got a big flower, anything like that, you're going to want to put them up in the 4 corners. This is going to get cut into 4 pieces. So each of these are going to stick out, and then this is going to get cut down in the middle. This will all make perfect sense as we go along. But I'm trying to figure out what to use for my initial colors here. So with the star, I have a white star. And I actually appear to have 2 of them. So that's kind of cool. And reflect on either side with the stars. This is a shooting star. So it goes along with that star. And actually, I'm not going to do that. This is why we use the design wall. You can lay them out on your table. You can do whatever you want, but you can change your mind before you put it all together. Since I have 2 of these, I'm going to use them in another square. This one I only have 1 of. So I've got a white piece to go with that. And let's see, then I have those 2 go with that. Nope, I need a red. I need a darker color. All right, let's look over here. What do I have here? I have blue and red. So what I'm going to do, I think I'm going to move this off to the side a little bit, and we're going to do all 4 at the same time. Because now I'm thinking I want the star in the middle. And the star on either side. Old Glory here. Old Glory here. Shooting star. And a shooting star. I haven't decided what to do in the 2 corners yet. So now I'm going to do a blue one. Let's see if we have the same setup with the blue as we have with the red. Those are individual whites. All right. So I used the shooting star in the red. And there are 2 of those. That works. Star of the blue in the middle. Star for the blue on the top. Star with the blue on the bottom. I don't have that print in blue or in red. Old Glory. Now keep in mind, these blocks will not be put together. These blocks are individual 9 patches, and we're going to cut them and then put them together. So don't be looking at comparing this one to that one. We're going to be putting them together later on. So that's why I'm doing the way I'm doing it. I'm looking at it that way. All right, this one has 1. Goes with that. These don't have anything to match up. That doesn't have anything to match up. Oh, this does. Those 2 go together. And okay. There we go. Now I've got my fabric all sort of set aside. And this one I need, all right, this would go with this. And that all matches up. All right, now, those don't have matches. That and that, I can do that. Nope, I need 2 solids. That has 2 pieces. That has 1. Let's do this. Now remember, this square is never going to get cut. The 4 corners are never going to get cut. And then go here. What do I have over here? Stars. I have shooting stars. Ooh, okay. No, that's going to go in the next block. All right, let's see here. All right, so we got lots and lots of light colors left over. Let's put this down here. Even though I have a white to go with that, or a couple whites actually. So then we take the blue, and down there is the shooting star blue. So now my question to myself is, do you want it all matchy-matchy, or do you want different things to go into different things? Do I really want both the light and the dark Old Glory on the same square? Or do I want a different light there that I can then, when I cut them up and mix and match them, that it'll match up somewhere else? Also, do I want my red and my blue basic main squares to be exactly the same? I don't know yet. I need to make the other 2 squares and start seeing which way those are going to turn out. So I have red with blue print on it. And I have one that has a white with red on it. Let's see about putting that in the middle. Putting a white there. Putting a light there. And now jumping over to the blue lights and doing a light blue. Actually, I have 2 of these. Let's do this. Put a light blue there and a light blue there. Again, we have no way of knowing how this is going to turn out. Once I get these squares put together, I am going to be cutting them and mixing and matching them. I'm not certain which way I want to go. This is part of quilting. You don't just get a book out and it says, take these squares, sew them together, put them all together, put a border on them, put a sandwich together, and put a backing. Anyone can do that. That's not everything that quilting is. So doing something like this, where you actually decide what fabrics go together. I have a matching set, because I cannot do color matching to save my life. I promise you. If I have to go into the quilt shop and I have to pick out 5 fabrics that I'm going to use to put together, it's not going to, I have to have help. I am no good at it. That's why I like using these charm packs. They come with fabrics that already coordinate. And obviously red, white, and blue is going to be standard anyway, because that's it. So just trying to see how you want to put this all together is fun in and amongst itself. So now I need 4 dark squares. Thinking I'm going to use 2 reds and 2 dark reds and 2 dark blues. That being said, I only have 1 dark red left that came in this charm pack. So, the 1 dark red goes there. I do have 3 red, white, and blue ones. Haven't decided where those are going to fit in yet. Since if I had 4 of them, I would use them as the 4 center squares. But I only have 3. So I'm not certain how I'm going to go with this. Still working that out in my head. That's why we have the design wall. We've got to look at these things and decide which route we want to take. All right, so I have this blue that doesn't have a light, that doesn't have a light anywhere. Put that there. This one has a couple of lights that I could associate with it, but now you'll notice this red pattern and this blue pattern are together. Do I want them to be right near each other like that? I'm thinking not so much. So I am going to move it over there. So now it's going to be far enough away from the same style design. All right, I do not have a single red to put up there, so I'm thinking maybe the red, white, and blue. Just maybe. Not certain, just maybe. All right, and we have a fourth square to make, and I didn't leave enough room there. So I need 5 dark pieces. I only have 3. So let's see what we can do here. Is that too low for the camera? No, that'll work. Blue in the middle of this one. So the red and blues are separated. Excellent. So that takes care of that. Now I have these 2 corners. I've got the red, white, and blue. They are light colors, but they're red, white, and blue. Let's see how that looks. And throw some more lights in here. Blues on either side of that, and then I'm going to use the reds on either side of this. Okay. I now have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I now have 6 squares left. That is exactly what I thought I should have left because the charm pack came with 42 pieces to it. And I only needed 39. 4 squares times 9, or 39, 36. 4 squares times 9 equals 36, 9 patches. And I have to decide, is this how I want it? Let's look at it. So that one looks really busy to me. These 2 prints together there's a lot of activity going on there. I don't think I like that. Let's put something more basic there. All right. So that's a little simpler. We gave that a little more color activity over on the side with that top one. And we took away so it wasn't as busy over here because that square just looks very busy to me. I'm okay with the bottom one. I'm not crazy about the 2 corner pieces being light fabric instead of a dark fabric, but they're not bad. I think I can do this. And that, because those stripes do look a little more dark, even though they're not, they're a light fabric, they look a little busier, so that works. And instead of, if I'm going to do that, instead of the red, white, and blue one, I've got one of these that are still here. Let's do that. All right. We're getting there. So that does look more like a darker square. Again, it is not. It is a light square, but it's looking more like a dark square because, excuse me, of all the stripes on it. So I kind of like that. I don't like the fact that there are 2 stripes next to each other. So let's take this one and go over here. Put the stripe over there. How are we looking? Well, we're getting there. And since we moved the patch on the top of that one, the one square, now the blue and the red are not absolutely identical. I think I don't like the fact that the Old Glories are right next to each other. So we're going to do that and that and that and that. What I really wish is I had the ability to get your comments going right now, because I would love to get opinions. We'd have a million of them, but sadly I can't see my comment section, so we can't chat with each other right now. I'm thinking that might be how I like it. I think I like those squares as they sit. There's some things that are right next to each other that are matchy-matchy. There's some things that aren't. Oh, that top row with that, now with that top thing. Now that I've moved the red the light Old Glory over, I think that top row is way too way too heavy. It's not here because the small print on this fabric with the lots of print interrupt each other. I think here, I want to do that. Let's see. Stand back. I always have to stand back and look. Yeah, that's not quite as busy. It's still a little busy. Is there anything else I have that's lighter and not as busy? No. Everything I have, unless I move... What if I do this? And actually, if I'm going to do that, I'm going to do this. Aren't charm packs fun? I would never buy this many fabrics just to get some squares out of them. So having all these different fabrics in all these different tones is just wonderful to be able to move around and play with. All right, so now those two are next to each other. That won't work either. Yes, it will. Yes, it will. All right, let's do this. Now those two are next to each other. Let's do this. Oh, I could do this for hours. I'll have to see how long it takes me to get this figured out today. You know what? No, I didn't. I did remember. Where are we at, time-wise? I'm not certain. There is honking outside. I wonder what's going on. Somebody must be celebrating something. That's exciting. I have no idea. No banners, no nothing. Just a lot of honking. That's going to mess me up now, too. Now, you'll notice I just put that bigger print in the middle where it's going to get cut up into 4 pieces. And honestly, with that particular print, I'm okay with it because there's so many. It's not a huge flower or one huge flag. It is a bunch of little ones, so even if we cut it into 4ths, which we're going to do, it's still going to be able to have some of that. We're going to be able to see the actual design. Let's see. That one goes that way. If I do that, it'll go that way. Do I have another one of those? I do somewhere. Where is it? There it is. What if I do... that. I can't put that there. How does that look? That's kind of neat. That bottom one has the same pattern up and down and across, but they're in reds going that way, they're in blues going that way, and the middle square is red and blue. So I kind of really like that. I really like that a lot. I have one blue in that pattern. And one red in that pattern. And then the two stripes in the red and the blue. I kind of like that. I'm not certain if I'm liking the blue and the red on the bottom. I'm wondering if maybe I should move. No, I like it just the way it is. I think I do. I think I like it just the way it is. All right, that square is done. I like that one just the way it is. I'm happy. Now, I like the way the red block is coming out. The red block, I think the designs, there's not too much busyness on top of each other. I think they're far enough, the stripes, things that are going one direction or another are going good. Now the question becomes, do I leave these stripes going up and down? Because the Old Glory are technically stripes going that way. Do I turn the Old Glories so they go up and down? I don't think I do. I think I want to keep them separate like that, so they go in different directions. I think I like them going in different directions. All right, I do believe we have our 4 squares. So now I'm going to take my 6 squares that I'm not using, and I'm going to stack them up. And I am going to put them over off to the side where you can't see them with my other charm pack that I've opened and not used all of it. Those are my scraps for the time being. I'm going to need starter fabric. Oh, I forgot about that. Let's get these out. I'm not going to use full squares. That would be silly. But I do have some here that I can use as starter fabric. Are those all full squares? Those appear to all be full squares. Oh, that's half cut, so I can use that one. All right. Set that off to the side. Then I need my clippers. Cut my fabric, get my starter strips. Those all made up, so I have plenty of starter strips. Those are sewn together. I don't know what those are for. That's a really long strip. All right. These in half. Starter fabric. Whenever I quilt, when I piece, I should say, because we're not quilting yet, we're still piecing. Instead of starting on the actual fabric, I use a starter piece. That way, when you get to the actual fabric that you're sewing, it's going to be, the stitch is going to start at the very beginning. You're not going to start, because I don't know about you, but when you see yourself, you usually start just a little bit in. So then the seam doesn't go all the way to the edge. So you always want to use starter fabric. All right, these I don't know. They were to make a 4-patch of some kind. You might consider, depending upon where you get your charm pack, to trim them down to make sure that they are 5 inches by 5 inches. I happen to know they all came from the same pack. I'm okay with that. We're going to be measuring later on to make sure that the squares are square. They will be, after we do this the first time, they're going to be 13.5 inches big. The first 9 patch is going to be 13.5 inches big, and then once we cut them and twist them, they're going to be 13-inch squares. I have the largest square I have is 12.5. So I'm not going to be able to square it using a square. I do not have a 14-inch square. I don't know why I don't have a 14-inch square now that I say that, but I do not. The largest I have 2 of these, with 2 different brands, but 2 different 12-inch squares. During our initial cutting, I'm going to be using my smaller square, I think, because it goes to 14 inches. It is 14 inches long, and the initial square is going to be 13.5 by 13.5. And I try and use the smallest ruler possible when I am cutting. If I have to use a larger square, a larger ruler, I will. But trying to keep this ruler as close to the size you need as possible. With the smaller rulers, you have better control. So I like to use the smallest ruler possible. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is I need to make my 9 patches. We have all the fabric. We have it all figured out where we want it to go. So now we're going to put it together. There are a gazillion tutorials on the internet on putting a 9 patch together. And I am going to do it my way. I have done it the fast way. I like it. I have no issues with it. I just prefer to press with my iron during the sewing of the 9 patch instead of finger pressing. I like to make sure that my seams are as nice and straight and taut as possible. This is my personal preference. If you've watched the videos where you sew the seam down, you press them a little bit with your fingers, and then you fold them and you sew the side seams, it's wonderful. It's a very quick way to get it done, and I have no issue whatsoever with it. It's a great process. But I personally like to physically press my seams. I will probably keep the squares together. You'll see what I mean as I do it. But I am going to keep the squares together so that I can then match them up more easily later on. But I am going to be bringing them to the iron and pressing during my stitching. That being said, by the way, if you like what you're seeing, don't forget to click on the like button. All the likes, if you do that, I get better analytics on my YouTube. So please like this video. If you want to subscribe so that you know when I'm going to be doing my next live video, which in this case will probably be tomorrow, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That way you'll get notified when I'm going to be going live again. All right. So, to pin or not to pin? That is the question. Personal preference. I am going to use clips. I am not going to line them up perfectly here. I am going to line them up a little bit so I know where I want to put my stitches, but I am not going to line them up so that they match up perfectly and then take them over. I am literally using the clip just to tell myself where I need to sew. Alright, now we're going to go over to the sewing machine. I have my sewing machine set up already. I am using a 60 weight thread, so it is a very thin thread. I am using a standard Universal 80 needle. Sometimes I use a Universal 75. I just happen to have 3 boxes of Universal 80s, and a box is 100 needles. So I have a lot of needles. I don't know how many I've used out of each box. I just know that I have a lot of needles. So I'm using just standard Universal 80. I have the same thread on my bobbin that I have on my top. I have a straight stitch plate in here, which means that there's no zigzag hole. And what that means, where is it at? There we go. So this is the standard plate that comes with your machine, and it's got a big hole right here so that you can do zigzags and stitches and all sorts of good stuff like that. I want to avoid having the chance that any extra fabric can get stuffed down into this hole as I'm sewing. So I have replaced the plate with a straight stitch plate. And then I have my needle set so it'll stop in the down position. My trusty Brother machine right here, it always stops in the down position by default. This machine does not do that. This machine defaults to stopping in needle up position, and I don't like that. I want it to stop in needle down. I have lowered my stitch length. On my machine, it's in metric, so I have lowered it down to 1.5. I don't remember what it is in US because I haven't used it. I think even my brother measures in 1.5. I can't remember. I don't usually change the stitch length on that machine, so I don't pay attention. And me personally, using this 1/4 inch piecing foot, I need to line up my edge of my fabric right on the edge of this toe here. And visually, I see things a little weird. So I have moved it over 1 to the right. If I move it over 2 to the right, it'll hit the plate and it'll break my needle. So I cannot go over more than 1, but I have found that having my machine set to go over just 1 little bit helps me get a more accurate 1/4 inch stitch. So here we go. Let's get going. And when we get to here, this is my starter fabric. That way I have everything, the stitch is completely on my fabric that I'm putting together. You'll see the needle stops in the needle down position. That's what I like because I like to be able to have the machine, everything set up and ready to go when I start. I'm not crazy about stitching with charm packs because of the scalloped edges, but I am crazy about stitching with them because they give me all my colors and I get lots of fabrics. So 6 of one, half dozen of the other. Depends on what makes you happy. I go with it because I do like having that assortment of fabrics. And I have done these in the wrong order. Oh well. We will just have to work with it. What I am doing is called chain piecing. I am just going along and I'm keeping everything together. Sorry, my hair is getting in the way. We need to get that out of there so it doesn't get sewn in. Okay, and we cut. Excellent. Let's go back over here. All right. So now I am going to trim off my starter fabric. We'll need that later because we're going to, when we do our next seam. I am not going to clip them apart from each other. I'm leaving them together, but I am going to trim off the tail of the fabric, of the thread. Okay, iron. My iron turns off by itself when you don't use it and it's sitting upright, so get that going. Got to let it warm up a little bit. Okay, so we have 2 darks with a light in the middle. And I have a fluorescent light above me flashing. I'm hoping that's not interrupting you guys too much. All right. I want to press to the dark fabric. That way, when I put them together, my seams are going to be nested quite nicely. Before I do that, I want to check one thing. I want to see how my 1/4 inch came out. Every time I do a 1/4 inch for the first time, I like to check and see how I'm doing. And it does appear that I'm doing all right. All right, so that's going to drive me crazy. Give me just a moment. I'll be right back. I've got to see if I can find either to get this light bulb out of here or if I can get another light bulb. I'll be right back. I do apologize. Okay, I apologize for that. My technical support team, aka the man who I live with, is currently on a conference call. So we're just gonna pray. It's lit up and it's staying solidly lit. So hopefully it'll stay that way. Because I really don't want you guys to see flashing lights all over the place. All right, where were we? 1/4 inch. I've got a 1/4 inch going. It looks like I did fine there. So now we're going to press towards the dark fabric. And you want to press down first without unfolding the fabric. And that's going to it's going to loosen up your seams or your threads in both the fabric and in the thread. Then I'm going to take my dark fabric and fold it up. Easier said than done, apparently. Fold it up, and this is where I do finger press to get it up a little bit. And then we do that. All right. This one, the dark side and the light side are reversed. So I'm going to flip this over there and then pull the dark down so that the seam is on the dark side. And again, with my fingers, lightly finger press to get it open. And then I'm going to put the heat on it, press it down. And now this one's going to go up. Press towards the dark. Excellent. Everything finger pressed and heat pressed. Now the last step is to use stabilizer, starch, whatever it is you use. I happen to use the Best Press. You don't want to put too much on here, just a little bit, so you can get it on there a little bit. And now we're going to make sure we've got a sharp seam. Okay. Now here's where I said I did something backwards. What I did was when I stacked my pieces up, I stacked them up with the bottom row on the top. So as we had it styled, these are backwards. Problem solved. I just had them going in the wrong direction, so when I was going to match them up, because I didn't cut these, I kept these together. That's going to be for the next endeavor. So I'm keeping those together, and I just have to make sure that I have them all ready to go. Let's see, where are we at? I have no timing on here today. I don't know what I changed. I changed something, obviously, so I have absolutely no idea. I know that it's it looks like 45 minutes. All right. So now we need to do some more sewing. These are not going to stay up here. These clips are just way too heavy for this. Oh, I said, look at that. This wall always amazes me. If you don't have one of these, you don't have to go buy one. Go to your dollar store and go to the area where they have tablecloths, and make sure and get yourself a tablecloth that has a felt backing to it. Stick it up on your wall, and you now have a design wall. You don't need to spend the money. The thing you won't have is all these lines in the background, and in all honesty, I don't use them. So it doesn't make any difference, in my opinion, whether you have them or not. All right, sewing machine to stitch. There's one side. Looks like it's sitting too high. Let's try this again. Next one. I don't know about you, but when I was in school, we had this class called Home Economics. And in Home Economics, you learned how to do multiple things, but one of them was sewing. And after you got done sewing on the paper, on the straight lines, to prove without thread, so you could prove to your teacher that you could sew a straight line, the first thing you did was you made a 9-patch pillow. I don't remember how big the squares were that I used. I know they weren't 5-inch squares because the pillow itself, I think, came out to be like 9 inches. So that would make the squares all finish at 3 inches. And I do not remember what kind of a seam allowance we had. Because I remember growing up always sewing with a 5/8 inch seam, which is standard for garment sewing. So I'm used to a 5/8 inch seam for garment sewing. And I don't know what seam allowance I would have used back then Oops, I didn't want to do that. See, I don't pay attention to what I'm doing, and I cut things when I'm not supposed to. I don't know what kind of a seam allowance I had back then, but I remember making, the very first thing I ever made was a 9-patch pillow. Alright. Seal my seams up. Press to the dark. Press to the dark fabric. Alright. This gets a little tricky. Actually, it won't, because I accidentally clipped that, so it won't be nearly as bad. But normally it's a little tricky. I'm going to take all of this and flip it up so that we can press to the dark fabric. Alright, everything is finger pressed, everything is seam pressed. Now we'll get out straight along a little bit so that we get our nice crisp seams. Alright. Excellent. That seam is wrinkling a little bit. Why is that happening? Let's press down here. There we go. That's a little sharper now. Alright. Back to here we go. And now I need pins. You're like, why do you need pins? Why don't you just use the clips? That is a perfectly valid question. And if you want to, use the clips. There are no quilting police that are going to come and take you away. The only time you're going to run into quilting police is if you decide you want to enter a competition. Then it's their way or the highway. When it comes to butting up the seams, I like to have pins. The clips hold it at the edge, whereas a pin, you go in one point and up another point, so it holds it tighter. And that way when you come up to it on the machine, it's going to stay straight. It makes me happy. Alright, so I'm going to do that. And you see, since we had dark and lights alternating, our seams, since we're pressing them all to the dark, are going to alternate. And on this top piece, my seam is facing this direction, and on my other piece, it's facing that direction. So they butt up to each other, and they're going to be real sharp points. Alright, so I've got that side done. Let's match up this side. And you want to feel it. You can feel the fabric when it comes together. You want to make sure that it comes together as far down as you can feel. So you want to make sure that it comes together all the way down. That's where you do get the sharpest points when you look at it. And here, I'm going to do the same thing. Alright, so now I have these done and those done. Now I can go to the machine and I can get them started. If you want to use more pins, use more pins. You want to use clips. It's up to you how you want to get it together. I have been doing this a while. I do have a pretty good feeling for where things go. When I started, I'd put a pin like every a quarter of an inch. I was massively over pinning. It made me feel more comfortable. That's what you want to do. Feel free. They're your pins. It's your machine. Just remember, we're going to take the pins out. We are not going to sew over them. All right. Leave the pins there. Take this with me. Woo! That was fun. All right. Have the lid off to the side so I have somewhere to put my pins. And now I'm going to get started. The speed at which you sew is completely up to you. My machine actually has the ability to change the speed so that the maximum speed I can go is whatever I have it set to. And I use that most frequently when I'm doing a very heavy fabric like a leather. Just because I don't want to take the chance of going too fast and messing up where the seams are. But I have watched many a video where people just go whew, and especially if it's a straight stitch only machine and they've been using it for decades, I've seen them just whip through this stuff like there's no tomorrow. So if you want to go faster, go faster. I'm taking my time just to make sure I get everything matched up. Make sure your fabric's all straight. Let's make sure our seams come together. Okay. Let's clip and press this up and see what we got. We have a flashing light again. Now, for these seams, I am going to press towards the center. It's up to you. You can actually press them either way because of the fact that we are not going to have too many seams that are together on the finished quilt. If I was putting these together with the next square, so if this 9 patch was going to get joined to this 9 patch, I would make sure that if these were pressed towards the center, these were pressed out. That way they are going to be able to butt up against each other. In this case, we are going to be cutting these squares up into other pieces, so they're not going to be, the seams are not going to be butting up against each other. So we press to get this fabric all loosened up and to get my iron started again, because it's been sitting upright, so it cooled itself down. Actually, as I'm, yeah, I am. I'm going to press towards the center square. So, over, finger butt, or finger press. I guess it's technically hand pressing, which I've said before, and I've just never paid attention. All right, nice seam. All right, I'm finding cat hair. There we go. Get that out of the way. I'm gonna press. Get those threads all loosened up. Turn it over. Now we're going to put our best press on. A little bit, don't get too carried away. And press our seams. Make sure all of our points are nice and sharp where the fabric's joined together. And we now have our first 9 patch. Okay. And the points, you want to make sure that your points are real tight, so they're real close together. And that's why you butted up your joints. Or your seams. When you butt up the seams going in opposite directions, you're going to get your points right next to each other. So everything is pretty sharp. Again, if for some reason you decide you want to be a competitive quilter and you are going to be submitting your quilts to be judged, points being matched up and sharp are very important. I'm looking at this one, and this is off by maybe a 1/16 of an inch. It's not much, but it is off. Whereas this one, and this one are all spot on. So this would give me a little bit of a ding if I was in a competition. So you want to make sure you're thinking about that as you're doing your quilting. All right, I'm going to go on to this one next. That way we have room on the board for all 4 squares across. So I'm going to do this one next. And this time I'm going to remember to reverse the order in which I took them off. I should have taken them off bottom to top instead of top to bottom. So I need bottom one there, the middle one stitched second, and the top one stitched first. That way, when I come back here and set it up, I'll be all lined up with those 3 pieces. All right, I only need 1 feeder square. That's not what I wanted to do. There we go. Slide the sewing machine over so that you can see the sewing machine. All right. Oh, I just realized I forgot to do something on that last square. When we get done with this seam, I will show you what I forgot to do on that last block. Alright. Let's go back to the overview. Camera. And here is what I forgot to do. I forgot to measure my block to make sure it's 13.5 inches square. So remember, this is a 14-inch ruler. So we're going to line it up in the corner. Oh, it's a 14-inch square. It is exactly 14 inches. Because it still has seam allowance on it. That was stupid of me. It still has the 1/4-inch seam allowance on either side. So an unfinished square is 14 inches. The finished square would be 13.5. Sorry, I forgot. And then we measure this way, and we're 14 inches. Now, I'm noticing there is a little bit off. And the reason there's a little bit off is because of these scalloped edges. Before we go on to the second block, let's get this trimmed up to 14.5 inches square. Because it is just slightly off, but I want to make sure it has 14 inches before we start. So we're going to have to do math in our heads, or ask Google, depending on our mood. The square starts off 5 inches square. You use 1/4 inch on all sides in this middle square. Use 1/4 inch all the way around. So that's a 1/2 inch. So it should be 4.5 inches wide. Let's see. It is 4.5 inches wide, and it's not even off. Let's see. Oh, that's a 4-inch square. Let's see here. That's the smallest I have. I have a 4 and a 6. I don't have a 4.5. All right, so I just match up the square, and I make sure, and it does seem there's just a smidge bigger, and I can live with that. So on this side, this is going to be 4.5 because we've used a 1/2 inch all the way around, so it's 4.5 inches square. This one is going to be 4.5 inches top to bottom, but it's going to be 4 3/4 inches side to side because we haven't used that side seam yet. So using the full ruler, which I can't use that one because it's not going to work, I'm going to have to go to the really big one. And I hate using this on little squares, but hey. Let's get these other rulers out of the way. I need this side to be 4 1/4 inches. So 4 3/4 inches. And when I say there's a smidge, I legitimately mean a smidge. So I'm going to pull out the rotary cutter. And I am going to cut along. You don't need to put pressure on your rotary cutter when you're cutting, because if you do, that means you need a new blade. So you see what I mean? I literally did just a tiny, tiny bit, basically fuzz, is all I took off the edge of that to make sure that it's exactly 14 inches. And it's pretty much the scallops is what is the issue. And like I said, with charm packs, you get that. And so I do like to square my blocks up completely and make sure that it is exactly the correct size before I get going. That way all 4 blocks are going to match each other completely. There we go. A little bit. Four and 3/4 from the seam. The last side. So now I'm actually going to use the lines on the design wall, and that's only to show you what size this quilt this ended up being. And match it up there. And actually it looks like these things are not quite the right size. Anyway. Because I know with certainty, I just measured them, they're 14 inches wide. And these squares are supposed to be 2 inches, and they're not. The lines, they're not. So we are now 14 inches wide. By 14 inches high. And that is a perfectly squared up block. And we're going to set these up here. That way they're accessible for the next block, but they're not on top of me. All right, now, did we close that up? We closed that up. We'll move that out of the way. Clip. Do not clip the blocks apart. I was just about to do that. I don't use this method all the time. I do tend to clip my blocks apart. Just because it gets a little floppy when you're pressing them. But for these purposes, it does make life easier to when we're matching things up. Alright. Press to the dark fabric. First we're going to go get our seam, get our fabric, our threads loosened up with the nice hot iron. And press this out. Flip this one over. press it out. And do this one. And a little best press. And get those seams nice and tight. Oh, I forgot. In my world today, it is the first day of summer. So happy summer. Getting ready for our Independence Day. That's why we've got the red, white, and blue fabrics. Because Independence Day is going to come up here on us shortly. All right, now. The question becomes, which way did I have this going? Because I cut off both sides. Now I don't remember which one was the top and which one was the bottom. Yes, I do. There we go. That's how we make sure we match everything up. Okay. So we've got our section. Now we need to put the third piece on. And we drop things. Stay. There. I'm getting little blue pieces of blue fabric underneath from when I trim those up. All right, you can stay there. All right. And now we sew. Match up my seam. Last section here was trying to hang off the edge of the table. That's not good. Let's see. There we go. Trim and press. Now remember, if you want to quilt along, you can. You're welcome to get yourself some fabric, set up your machine so you can see what's going on, and start quilting. Or you're also welcome to just hang out with us. When it comes to quilting clubs, there are always people that just sit around and watch everybody else quilt. That's perfectly fine too. Hopefully we'll soon get the chat feature going so that I can respond to things, or others can respond to you and your questions. So we can have it even more like we're sitting around all together, just sewing and having a good time. All right, we finger press there. Of course, we won't be able to share materials. That was always the nice thing. And when I say material, I mean fabric. That was always fun, because if you're sitting around with a bunch of people and you're all quilting and you really like somebody else's fabric and they've got just enough left for you to use for something, it was always fun to be able to trade out material, fabric, and use stuff from other people. Because in the last quilt I made, still not certain where that fabric came from. I don't remember. But it is not fabric I would have ever chosen on my own. And I've been meaning to. I will be putting it out for sale, that last quilt out for sale on Etsy. I just haven't done it yet. But yeah, you can get fabric that you would never in a million years choose on your own. But golly, it might just be the one little piece of something that makes your quilt pop. All right, so we have all of this. Now we have to pin. Again, if you want to use clips, use clips. I just happen to like pinning at this point. I like my seams really sharp and tight. And for me, the only way I get that is if I pin. When I clip them, I still slip a little bit, and I just don't like it. Now this one, I'm noticing when I butted up the joint, or the seam, I noticed that the bottom fabric is a little bit puffier. So I want to make sure that when I stitch with that dark blue fabric on the bottom. The feed dogs are on the bottom, and they're going to feed the fabric through the machine. The top fabric, if you're not using a walking foot, the top fabric is just kind of going to slide along. So it can get shifted a little bit. I want to make sure that I get that bottom fabric just that tiny bit tighter. So I am going to hold it a little bit tighter when it feeds through, just so that I'm certain that all of the fabric goes through and my corners are perfectly tight. I really hope that light isn't doing too much problems to this. I'm going to have to watch this video later on and see. It may turn out you guys aren't seeing it at all. It's really messing with me. Every so often it just starts flashing. And it's a fluorescent bulb, and we have a ton of them. So it shouldn't be too much of an issue, and tomorrow when we come back to this quilt, it will be replaced, I promise. Alright, I'm noticing here I have a similar issue, so I want to put the clip in so I know which side is going to be down for me, for both of those. Alright, that piece of feeder fabric is done. Let's go over to the machine and get this stitched up. Alright, so I want to make sure that that side is down. Got my because these clips actually have a top and a bottom. So that's why I used the clips here, because I knew I want to make sure I put the bottom on the bottom where I wanted it. So what I'm doing is I'm leaving this pin right where it's at because I want to make sure it stays there. And I'm making sure that as it goes through the machine, the fabric stays tight together. So the bottom fabric is actually going to get fed through a little bit tighter. And when we get to this seam, it's going to stay tight. Now remember, we do not sew over pins, because otherwise the needle could break and pop up and jump it, poke us in the eye, which we don't want to happen. We want to make sure that seam stays tight. All right, there we go. Next seam, I want to do this way. That way, that's why that's there. New feeder fabric. All right, here we go. So we know that we've got the issue with the fabric on the bottom. So we want to get as close as possible to the pin without sewing over the pin. Get the pin out. And I'm holding this seam together so that I know that it's going to be together. And now, take the clip out and see how that top fabric is taut and that bottom fabric is just a little tight, wobbly underneath. We're going to stretch the fabric a little bit so that we get everything all tight and close together. Now, same problem here. We want to make sure that the seams stay butted up against each other. Oh, if you don't have one of these, get some chopsticks. The next time you order Asian, just save your chopsticks if you don't use them. And use that. It works just as well. I used to work for a sewing machine store. So I have all the toys and bells and whistles and all that good stuff. You don't have to. All you need is an unused chopstick. And that'll help guide the fabric. Because you don't want to push the fabric, you don't want to pull the fabric. You want to let the feed dogs do all the work. Alright, let's see here. Excellent. press your fabric. Now, I'm looking here, and you're not going to be able to see it in the camera at all, but this center square has got just a little bit of waviness to it. That's because it was just that little hair, little bit bigger. So when we stretch the fabric a little bit. The side of it that I've pressed, where it also had some extra fabric, you can't see it at all. So once you press it, if you're talking an actual 1/8 of an inch or even a 1/16 of an inch, you can't do this. You've got to start over and recut. In this case, it was such a minuscule amount that it wasn't going to hurt anything for me to do what I did. I was able to do it and get everything, and it'll come out perfectly straight and fine in the end. Now I'll press the other side, that side that's still wavy. I'm going to do that, and it presses right out. Okay. Get a little vest press on here to get it all sharp. And this time we don't have any corners that are off by a little bit. I am very happy about that. They are all spot on. All right, block number 2. Now we do have to square it up. We didn't do that with block 1 right away. Remember, forgot about it, skipped that step. And if you want, you can do all the squaring up at the very end. If you want, you can do all of your side pieces. You don't have to follow the order in which I'm doing this in. You just need to get 4 9 patches sewn together. This just happens to be, for my brain, how it works best. Now, the other thing is, you're probably saying, well, why don't you just start in the corner, measure to 14 3/4 inches, and cut off? Then you would have more fabric on this side and less fabric on this side. So you actually have to make the same amount of cuts from the seams out so that you have the same amount of fabric all the way around. If you have a 14.5 inch square, you put it down, you center the square in the middle, and all is right with the world. I don't have a 14.5 inch square. The largest I have is 12.5. So here we go again. 4 3/4 inches from the seam. Turn. That barely had anything that needed to be cut from it. Just that top square. That one came in a little shy on the bottom. about there. I'm going to mark that so that I know when I'm centering, when I'm evening up squares later on, I know that area is just a little bit short, too short for 4 3/4 inches. And you say, well, how could that possibly happen? It's because it was either cut weird or when I sewed it together, I used too big of a seam. One of those two things happened. And again, it's such a minuscule amount that we'll be able to get that in with the seam allowances later on. It's not going to cause us a problem there. Okay. Fuzz, basically. And we now have a second completed square. All right. 1 and 2 complete. And it's been about an hour and a half. So we probably have a little bit, about an hour to go. We'll get there. Okay. So now we want to do our third square. Clips. Little pieces of square all over the place. All right, 1. I was supposed to go from the bottom. I knew that. I did it backwards again. And 2. And 3. And now we do 3, 2, 1. All right, now we'll go to sewing machine. And just so you know, I did put on a brand new needle today. Got that after the last quilt. I had used that needle on a couple different projects. They were both kind of small, so I went ahead and used it on 2 projects, but I have switched out to a new needle now. So this is the point where there are people that would just finger press these seams and then have the other 3 sitting on the sewing machine. They wouldn't stand up and go to their pressing machine and press them. Like I said, I like to press as I go, and I like to completely press. I'm not comfortable just finger pressing. My seams, I tend to sew slightly fat 1/4 inch anyway, which is why I move my needle over. So for me, I like to get them pressed and sharp and as good to go as I can before I sew the next seam on. You stay there. You two do that. There we go. All right. Okay, let's get here. Now we put them up on the wall. Make sure we're going the right direction so we don't get them mixed up. Excellent. And over we go. So if you are sewing along with us, I hope you're still with us. I don't think I'm going too fast. I'm trying not to. If you are having issues keeping up, let me know in the comments. I cannot see them right now. I will not be able to respond immediately, but I will be looking at the comments after this, and I will try to adjust accordingly. So if you have any suggestions, let me know down there. Okay, sewing machine. So you're seeing here how the red is showing through a little bit more. That's probably how on that other square, I got just a little bit off, and it's wasn't quite 4 3/4 inches on the edge. So I'm trying to make sure I'm scooting it right over. Even though it's just a tiny bit, it can make a difference later on. Now with this particular block, the way we're going to be setting it up, the absolute mandate of being spot on like that is going to get negated later on when we cut the blocks into fourths. But because, like with the last one, I did have to mark where I have to watch out and make sure I don't line up on that specific area for the 1/4 inch, because it's going to be off. It's not the right size. I need to kind of hide. What's going to happen is, with that seam, I'm going to have the part that's too small go over a little bit, and I'm going to follow down the side here, and that's going to get rid of the part that's not quite a 1/4 of an inch wide. Okay, so now I've got the second set of 3 sewn on. And in the world where they do the finger press, now is the time. They wouldn't have stood up at all. They would have stayed there. They would have whipped it together and sewn up the other 2 seams right away. Again, I like to have it fully pressed. If you don't, feel free to do it the other way. It does go much faster because it doesn't involve standing and moving. Now, also, some people have a pressing area just to the side of their sewing machine. I did debate on that when I designed this room, and I do believe that in my next room I will be doing that. But in this space, for what I'm doing right now, I like the setup the way it is and prefer it this way. I don't have an issue standing up to iron at this moment in time. I don't have a problem with it. All right, so that's pressing to the dark. This is there. Let's press that to the dark. Hand press you to the dark fabric. And then hand press you to the dark fabric. Excellent. And then go across. Get those seams nice and sharp. Now we're going to butt up our seams. I don't seem to be having the issue with this one where where the fabric is off just a little bit. It all seems to be fitting quite nice and tight, so I don't need to mark it and do any of that this time. All right, back to the machine. Stop and get a little water, hydrate. All right. Let's make sure we keep our seams butted up against each other. Keep our fabric right. There we go. Stop being stubborn. Make sure our corner stays, but the seams stay together, so make sure we take our time. Okay, make sure the seams stay tight. They're butted up. Trim and press. Trim. Again, I'm going to press towards the center, just for consistency's sake. Again, you can press either way you want. And as long as I'm repeating myself, if you're enjoying this video, if you're enjoying sewing along with me, or if you're just watching this to see how things go, either of those things are perfectly acceptable, and I really appreciate you watching. If you'd go ahead and like the video down at the bottom, or on the side, or however you do it in your world, that would be phenomenal. Gives me feedback as to how we're doing, how many people have been by. Also, if you want to see more of these, I anticipate at this point, tomorrow I will be streaming part 2 of this particular quilt. But if you just want to be notified in general when I'm making quilts and when I'm going to next be live, go ahead and hit the subscribe button. That way you can see when I'm going to be heading live. I am on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Instagram, I haven't been posting quite as much. Instagram, you are going to see my my other crafting also. I haven't figured out a way how to YouTube out my crocheting or my knitting yet, so that's on hold for the time being. We're still working on getting cameras and lighting and things like that set up for just doing this particular, just doing the quilting. But I do on Etsy, on my Etsy store, I sell not only the quilts. Most of what I make, I'm going to be making here on this YouTube channel is going to be sold on Etsy. I'm legitimately using up all of my fabric, or trying to get as far into my stash as I can. When we moved 3 years ago and we moved into this house, the amount of stuff that we had to move as far as fabric goes was just mind-boggling. And I do want to do some more garment sewing, and all of my garment fabric is shoved into the closet because all of my quilting fabric takes up all of the area out here. Well, I shouldn't say that. You see I have yarn here. So this is where my yarn stash is at. If you watched any of my videos from earlier than this, I've moved the stuff around in here to try and get more compatible with you doing the videos while still being able to comfortably sew. All right, square number 3. Let's get it trimmed up to 14 inches wide. Rotary cutter. 4 3/4 inches. And turn. 4 3/4 inches. And turn. Alright, we didn't have any skinny spots this time, so that's good. Nothing we have to mark and say, hey, don't measure from here. And like I said, a couple things could have happened. It could be just the way the square was cut. It could have been cut just a smidge too small. Fabric does shift slightly when it's being cut, so you never can tell what happened to it. All right, square number 3. Those are looking nice. Excellent. All right. Rotary cutter closed. Water. So while I was researching to do this particular project, I like to go on YouTube and see the way other people do it, just so that I can see, I know there's multiple ways to do everything, but something that I found was a double disappearing 9-patch, and I cannot wait to try that out. It turns out that I have some 8-inch squares that I ordered. I don't know where I ordered them from or why. I think it came from Wish, but I'm not certain. But so these are 8-inch squares. And in this other double disappearing 9-patch, you use a 5-inch charm pack and a 7-inch charm pack. Since I have 8 inches, I can cut them down without a problem. And I think that's going to be my next project. I haven't decided for certain because this is a lot of kind of spring fabric that I got from the Fat Quarter Club. And this is just a bunch of different stuff. And I haven't looked to see if they match up yet because obviously I've been preparing to do this quilt. But I'm thinking that might be my next try, is to do that. Even though I've just done a 9-patch, doing a double disappearing 9-patch, I had never seen that before, and it was fascinating to me. So I might try that one next, or just go to another strip. I'm not certain which way I'm going to go yet, because I do have the red, white, and black that I'm looking at that I keep going, I can do something with this, and then that Fat Quarter or charm pack there. And I think I should have 2 more charm packs probably in the mailbox. I just haven't gone to look. Our mail is not out in front of our house. It's actually a couple blocks away. So I haven't gone to look to see what that looks, if I have those yet, and what they look like. Because they're a surprise. That's part of the fun with the kits, is they're a surprise. The square's not over there, it's over here. All right. This over, no. See, on the fourth square, I'm finally going to remember. Start at the bottom. That way I don't have to reverse them. So 3. Row 2. And row 1. And to the machine. Did I get it? Yep, there we go. Let's see here. Flip off my feeder fabric. Off my tail. Now this is going to be a little confusing for me because I remember I've got the what's not really dark, but it is. We're using it as a dark because it's half dark. Go that way. All right. Those are my dark fabrics. Loosen up the stitches a little bit. Press the dark fabric. Okay, let's see here. Okay, so now we're going to match up our last 3 squares and turn them into our last 3 strips. There and over to the machine so we can get that. Yep. So I don't know if you can see it on the camera. You probably can't. But this red, you can just barely see the white fabric popping through because the white was cut just a smidge bigger. And you cannot control that, especially when you're using charm packs. You just sort of have to go with it. But even if you're cutting it yourself, when you're cutting, are you cutting with the fabric on one side of the line or the fabric on the other side of the line? Are you trying to make sure that the fabric is centered in the line? If it's just that hair. And it honestly can make a difference if you are trying to be so perfect that you're going to get frustrated if that's all you're concerned about is making sure everything is perfect. Don't do that to yourself. Your quilts are never going to be perfect. Nothing you ever make is going to be perfect. In fact, there are beliefs in quilting, and then there's Native American. It's all tied. They're all similar beliefs that only God is perfect, and that everything else you do is going to have a small error in it. And there are some places where they purposely put an error in something because nothing ever should be perfect. So don't strive, do your best, but if you mess up a little bit, don't beat yourself up. It's okay. It'll be fine. Just like we started today. I didn't know where this was going to go. I didn't know what the designs were going to look like. I just went with it. You never can tell where it's going to go. You let the fabric talk to you, and it will decide what it wants to do. Okay. Take my pins and my clips that are over here, back to the table. And I'm going to put the pins in there. Clips. Still going to need a couple of pins. Okay, let's get this pressed so that we can get it stitched. pressing to the dark again. Get all those seams under that dark fabric so you don't see them through the light fabric. This is the dark fabric for here. Sharpen up my seam. Okay. Pin it up so we can get our last little bit done here. Oh, yes, I am holding a pin in my mouth. I have the head in my mouth. I do not have the pointy side in my mouth. Should I be doing this? No. For safety purposes, we should not put pins in our mouth. But in reality and habit and the fact that I've been doing it for decades, I do always make sure it's the non-sharp side, and that's that. Okay. Butt up my seams. Come on. All right, now I'm looking at this and the white fabric is a little bubbly. So I closed up my clips too early. I want to sew that way. Don't have that problem over here, do I? No. That side's fine. It's just that side that I want to make sure that I sew in with the certain fabric down below. This side first. Since I know I want a certain fabric on the bottom, let's do this first so I get that out of the way. And I don't forget. Make sure you keep those seams together. Alright, so now I know that I want to hold this just a little bit so that I could get that bottom fabric. That keep my seams straight. in together. Looks like my fabric's moving just a little bit here. It might just be the blue and white that I'm seeing through there. But it looks like the bottom fabric is sticking out further than the top fabric. So I'm going to keep my bottom seam straight, so the whole block stays square. Okay. Almost forgot my feeder fabric. Okay, let's make sure that seam is where it needs to be. Hold it down. Make sure we've got everything straight and square. Voila. All right. Running into my shelving unit here. Let's go here. Trim it up. Cut off the feeder fabric. Cut off the tails. And press to the center. And as I'm looking at this, it dawned on me I hadn't mentioned. When we chain stitch like that, we have, there's like a loop of the thread that shows up just a little bit. You're never going to be able to see it on that camera. But there's a little loop that shows up. And the idea is to have the least amount of bulk in your seams as possible so that the seam almost disappears. And that thread can kind of make it look like there's bulk under there. But if I wasn't leaving it, if I was actually clipping it every time, it would still be the same amount of thread because I don't trim it down to the fabric. I don't know anybody that I've ever seen that does trim it down to the fabric. I could be wrong. There's probably somebody out there that does, and I'm sure I'll hear about it if I'm wrong. But I have never seen anyone trim the threads to the fabric when you're chain piecing. You trim it on the tail, you trim it at the beginning, but I've just never seen anybody get that specific about trimming the threads between the chain piecing. And I've watched a lot of quilting videos. Doesn't mean that it's right. Because just because everybody else is doing it doesn't mean you should be doing it. But, to me, I think that would just be going a little off the rails. I don't see any real reason for that. That being said, you're going to see other people that think my pressing and my obsession with pressing is nutty too. But for me, like I've mentioned multiple times, I sew a fat 1/4 inch. I know I do. I've been working on it for years and years and years, and still I just cannot seem to get where I need to be to stop that. And when I say fat, I'm not talking a major amount. Just a little bit, but just that little bit can make a difference. All right, we now have 4 9 patches. Let's move this one here and put this one here and this one down here. So if you wanted to make a patriotic wall hanging, or you wanted to make a lap quilt, something like that, and you want it to be done quick and easy, this would be where you would stop. You would piece these 4 squares together, and there you go. But that's not what we're doing. Oh, I forgot to trim this. Having trouble remembering trimming today. All right, let's get this to 4 3/4. Make sure all of our sides are perfectly same. And so this would be why you would want them absolutely the same. If you were stopping here and finishing this quilt as just some 9 patches, this is where you would stop, and you would want to make sure they're all the exact same size. That way the quilt comes out completely square and nice and even. Since we are going to take it another step, I still like to trim this up just to make certain that everything is even. Okay, there we go. Now we have 4 squares, and I don't remember which way this is going. But anyway, so this would be the point now where you would sit back and you would look at it and you'd go, all right, where do I want these 4 squares to go together? Which direction do I want it? Do I want this one to go this way? You know, you go through everything we went through earlier at the beginning of the video. You're going to do it again to try and see where you want these to go together. Sew them together, the 2 seams, and then you'd go on from there. Like I said, we are going to go the next step over. I'm going to start with this square here. I'm going to show you how this works, which is this square. So I'm going to move this down out of my way. And 3. So those 3 are going to get their activities in a bit. We're going to start with just this one. I mentioned to you earlier, I almost caught myself on that pin that's there. So I mentioned to you earlier that the center square is 4.5 inches square. And we verify that by going 4.5 by 4.5. That is correct. We want to cut down the middle, and across. And to do that evenly, we need to cut 2 1/4 inches from the seam. Because 2 1/2 divided by 2, or 4 1/2 divided by 2 is 2 1/4. So we're going to cut from the seam, not from the edge. Make sure you don't cut from the edge. You always want to use a straight seam. And we've been using these seams to square up the square, and we want to make sure we continue to do that. So we're going to go 2 1/4 inches in from the seam. And that gives us our halfway mark. And I just moved my ruler before I started cutting. So hold down your ruler and go down the middle. Do not pick up the fabric. Turn your cutting mat, because we want to keep everything where it is. We don't want it shifting. And we go to 2 1/4 from the stitched seam. And now we go down the middle. All right, now here is where the magic of a disappearing 9 patch comes. This is the square we started with. This is what we had before I went to the cutting board and cut it. This is perfectly fine just the way it is. As I said, you can use this as we go. Or you can do some different things with it. This, we're going to turn 90 degrees. Then I'm going to take this one and turn it 90 and 90 again. Then I'm going to take this one and I'm going to turn 1, 2, 3. And that one I'm going to leave as it is. So now we have a completely different looking square. We've got a big one, a little one, and as we repeat, we could do a big one, little one, big one, little one, big one, little one, big one, little one, and going in opposite directions. That would work. Or we can turn them all so that the big squares are in the middle, and now we have a really big square in the middle with a bunch of little squares around it, but they're not all the same fabric. They're all different fabrics and different styles. And so you can now use these as individual blocks. Let's say we wanted to do that, and that, and that, and that. So now when you look at it, you've got sort of a table runner going on. You've got everything facing that way. This is why when we looked at it, we wanted to make sure that these had some prints to it and that this wasn't too bad. A lot of people will use the center squares as black and then do different colors around it. There's a million different ways to make this go. There are also different ways to cut the 9 patch to get the disappearing 9 patch. So there are options there. What I'm going to do now is I'm going to cut these other 3 squares, and we're going to use these as individual blocks. We're not going to be defined by stating that these 4 blocks have to stay together. We're going to mix and mingle all of our blocks together and see what we can come up with. I have not yet decided, and I mentioned this in my last video, I honestly have not yet decided if I am making a lap quilt, a table runner, or a square wall hanging. The other thing, the reason I've got these is because I may decide I want to put a border somewhere in here instead of having everything just right on top of each other. I honestly have not yet decided. I am letting the fabric tell me what to do. So let's get these other 3 blocks cut up, and let's see what the fabric wants to do. So here we go, 2 1/4. Keep our fabric straight, keep our ruler there. Rotate. Okay, next block, 2 1/4. Nope, shifted my ruler. And last but not least, block number 4. Started moving slightly with my ruler as I was going. That's why you have to be really careful not to press too hard with your rotary cutter. If you press with your rotary cutter, you can shift the cut with the ruler. That's not good. All right, let's see here. Now, close that up. Excellent. I'm going to walk over to the side here. Get my chair out of my way. We're going to look. I do not at all like the way that came out. All I did was put them straight across, and I definitely do not like the way that came out. At least the bottom 2 squares, bottom 2 rows have some dimension to them because they were of different colors and shades of fabric when the block was made. So making that solid blue block and making a solid red block might not have been the best idea I had, But if we mix them up, I think they'll look much better. So let's see. I am seeing leaving it the way it was, but doing this. What about that? How does that look? Intermingling the red and the blue. It's not bad. The fact that the red and the blue stars are sitting next to each other is a little annoying to me. That kind of, yeah, that's not exactly where I want to go. Let's see. What if I do that and that and leave those together and then bring in that and go with, let's get that out of the way. This, no, I don't know if I like that. Let's put another one of these. Let's see here. Let's go that way. That's not bad. And then a true red there. Blue and red there. And that might be too close to each other, but let's see. Now I have a square left over. That's not too bad. And then I could take and put some borders on it. And that would give me a lap quilt. That would give me a decent sized lap quilt. That's not bad. Let's see, what time is it now? It's almost 2 o'clock. So it's been almost 3 hours that we've been stitching together. I don't think I like having those two blocks the same next to each other. Let's see here. Well, and I don't have them twisted over there. So this should go there. This whole row should be that way. Maybe. And this would mean I wouldn't have any seams, too many seams to match up. I don't want that one. I want a different, don't I have, I don't have a different blue to match up to that, so let's go there. No, I need a red. Now we got two of the same next to each other. Don't like that. There we go. Now I've got a nice table runner. I'm just not certain what I'm going to do yet. So I'm going to sleep on it. I am going to stand here and look at this a few times throughout the day. I might throw in some borders to see how that works. But I think for today, this is going to be where we're going to stop. And we're going to sleep on it, think about it a little bit, figure out which way I want to go, which direction I want these things to all face. Now that I'm looking at my TV above me and I'm looking at it, I don't know if I like those little squares the way they are. I have to think about it. I'm going to look in some books and see which direction they have the different 9 patches going and see which way it goes. But alright, so if you enjoyed this video, please click the like button down below, and if you want to be aware of when I'm going to be on again, click on the subscribe button. Again, I am also on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, and I have an Etsy store where you can purchase not only my quilts but some of my yarn crafts that I make also. So this has been Carol the Crafty Grandma. It's been a pleasure, and we will see you all again. I'm going to post, it's probably going to be tomorrow at 11. I just have to